You know, just making stuff up.
Okay, we'd like to welcome you all here. We're going to start kind of, almost on time. The restrooms are outside and to my left, which would be most of your rights, right, until you turn around. If you're eating in here, you're welcome to eat it here. There are no crumbs allowed. So I just want to, no pressure at all. We have snacks afterwards. This is sponsored by Many Voices. And water. And water. Yes, there's water out there. This is sponsored by Many Voices. We're kind of a loosely organized group that responds to issues that people amongst us are interested in. So 2 years ago, Margaret was here in January in 2017 and talked to us a little about what the immigration laws were already meaning in her life. She's an immigration lawyer. She's the retired Army Reserve Lieutenant Colonel, military police. Military police. So I guess that their behavior order is not one of our issues in here. So you better be in order because she knows what to do about it. And I think she's awesome. She's brilliant, and but when she speaks, I understand her, and she makes me feel smarter. So I'm going to encourage her to talk about what else that you would need to know about her, and then she's going to catch us up to date on what's happening in immigration.
Okay, so I have this cute little slideshow, but you probably aren't going to be able to see it very well from the back, so I'll point out the important stuff. These are some birds that have little signs. Keep off our worms. Go back to Africa. Migrants not welcome. And I think that's kind of what is going on right now. I'm going to be talking about some of the details of that. And then, of course, how is it impacting Alaska? Because there are direct impacts in Alaska right now. And I did show you the Samantha Bee segment earlier. I know many of you couldn't hear it exactly, but you're welcome to go back home on YouTube. Turn it up really high because there's really funny jokes in there. And the good news about the Samantha Bee, there's a little bit of good news too. The Samantha Bee episode talks about these immigrants in the military suing to get their citizenship. And yesterday, a federal judge ruled in their favor. And the federal judge basically ordered the Department of Homeland Security to start processing their citizenship applications and let them get their citizenship. Many of them were waiting for 3 years, serving in the military, and they were not being allowed to get their citizenship because of these new background checks the Department of Defense came up with that caused them to be kicked out of the military if they had foreign parents. But when they were recruited, everybody knew they were foreigners, and all foreigners had foreign parents. So the joke in the Samantha Bee episode is the government spent millions of dollars of your taxpayer dollars figuring out that foreign people have foreign parents, and then kicking them out of the military for having foreign parents, which made no sense, but that's some of what's going on today in the world. All right, so I'm going to talk about a little bit about what was going on before President Trump took office, and then what's happened now that he's taken office. But kind of the short version is we have the invisible wall, we call it. They're slowing legal immigration. So there's been a substantial slowdown in legal immigration. Everybody thought we wanted to stop illegal immigration, but now we're also stopping legal immigration as much as we can. They're increasingly denying visa applications, denying citizenship applications, particularly for members of the military. Weirdly, people in the military are now being more likely to be denied citizenship than civilians. So it's actually, you're worse off if you're in the U.S. military today, you're more likely to get your citizenship application denied, which is causing, obviously, problems with recruiting because people now don't want to join the military because it's going to make it harder for them to get citizenship. That's a complete reversal of past policies. We have reduced refugee numbers, and I'll talk more about what that means for Alaska, but that's happening in Alaska. More asylum seekers are being detained. You probably have watched the news on that. But they're much more likely now to put somebody in jail who's seeking refuge in their country. And that is having some impacts on Alaska. And then I will wrap up by telling you more directly some stories about what's going on in Alaska. So before President Trump, we were having a lot of immigration problems in America. We did have a lot of unauthorized immigration, mostly driven by the fact that laws have been bad. And this is something I think the public doesn't really have much awareness of, but we have a lot less illegal immigration when we have sensible laws that people can comply with. And we don't have sensible laws. That's Congress's fault. So today, for example, I had a young man come to see me with his brother, and his brother is a U.S. citizen, and the young man is not a U.S. citizen, he's a foreigner from a Central American country. And the older brother, who's a citizen, filed a visa petition to try to get his younger brother legal back in 2004. The government still has not made a decision on the case. Okay, it's just been sitting there in a file room somewhere since then. So he came in to see me to try to figure out if there's anything he can do for his brother. And his brother's in Alaska, working hard, no criminal record, exactly the kind of immigrant we want in America. No criminal record, well behaved, working hard, physically fit, paying taxes, all that good stuff. I had to give him the bad news that because of our laws, the brother is never going to be able to get legal. Okay, the older brother filed a petition for him, but the petition is actually no good because we have a crazy law that was passed a long time ago, in 1996, that says if you're in the U.S. illegally, which the brother is, you can't get your green card in America. You have to go home to get it. But if you leave to go home to get it, you're banned from coming back for 10 years. So the brother's never going to be able to take advantage of the petition that his older brother filed more than 10 years ago because he's going to have to leave the country, the U.S., to go back to his home country when the visa gets approved for him. And as soon as he leaves, he's in that catch-22 where he's banned for 10 years. So by trying to become legal, he gets banned from the U.S. for 10 years and has to hang out in Central America, at great risk to himself for 10 years at least before he can come back. You got a question?
Yeah, that young man you're talking about, he's probably paying into Social Security.
Yep.
And he'll never be able to collect.
Never be able to collect it. No. But that's helping you. You know why? Because there's millions of people like him paying Social Security and keeping Social Security afloat. And the government knows darn well they're all paying into it, they're never going to take the money out. And so that actually, kind of, to me, it's sort of a ripoff of these people working and paying into it, but it's actually keeping Social Security afloat. They're pulling that money out to pay American citizens.
Do they have a phone Social Security form?
Well, you don't have to be a citizen to have a Social Security number. Okay, and in fact, many people who are not U.S. citizens have Social Security numbers and pay taxes. And a long time ago, before they started requiring you to prove that you were legally in the U.S. to get a Social Security number, anybody could get one. If you were here in America, you walked into Social Security and you said, "I'm here, I'd like a Social Security number," and they give you one. So lots of people have paid into it. And then many immigrants got one legally at some point, but maybe they fell out of status later. They still have the same number and they can still use it. They pay taxes with it. The IRS also is very good at taking money from immigrants. They don't care what your status is. You're allowed to pay taxes even if you're unlawfully here. And they're very helpful about collecting taxes from immigrants. In fact, they'll even give you an individual taxpayer identification number so you can pay taxes if you don't have a Social Security number. So they're very good about that. That's a plus. But this stuff that I just mentioned, these crazy laws, they've been going on since before President Trump. It's not his fault. Okay, in fact, it's Bill Clinton signed the worst laws in 1996, the toughest immigration laws ever in American history. So before President Trump came into office, we had a huge immigration problem. We had lots of unlawful immigrants in the country, no way for them to get legal. We had obviously lots of conflicts going on in the world, lots of refugees trying to come here, trying to come to any country that would take them because of the conflicts. We have right now, and this happened before President Trump, we've had the biggest refugee crisis ever in world history going on. A lot of people don't realize that either. It's worse than the end of World War II because of the conflicts going on the planet right now. More people are displaced right now than at any time in world history that we can remember and they can recall. And the UN has said that you go to the UN's website and look at, they'll talk about the refugee crisis. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but that was going on before President Trump. So let's get into a little bit more details. Not everything was rosy before President Trump came along, but here's a little quick and dirty cartoon comparison. The Ronald versus the Donald. The Ronald, of course, being Ronald Reagan standing in front of the Berlin Wall saying, tear down this wall. And the Donald saying, build up this wall. The one big striking difference that's happened is that before President Trump came into office, across the board, lawmakers, Congress, experts, everybody pretty much agreed that it didn't make sense to build more border walls. That was pretty much universal agreement. Congress wouldn't fund a whole lot of stuff. They were actually focusing on technology. They were trying to use more border controls with drones and things like that, and electronic means. And they were actually saying openly that the way to make less illegal immigration would be to reform our immigration laws so it was easier for people to come legally. There would be an incentive for them to come illegally. And to try to use more technology to focus on the actual causes of problems. So, for example, one of the reasons we're having so much of a crisis at the southern border right now is because we have 3 countries in Central America that are non-functioning societies at the moment. The death rates have skyrocketed. Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. They're basically kind of lawless societies at the moment, and they've been taken over by gangs. Interestingly, gangs made up largely of a lot of people who learned their tricks in America, because we deported a lot of the leaders of the gangs back to Central America, and those countries couldn't handle these folks. In fact, it was kind of a running joke with, not even a joke, it's kind of sick, but the Mara Salvatrucha, MS-13, has anybody heard of that gang? Yeah. They actually viewed our deportation flights as kind of their recruiting opportunity. So we would send deportation flights back to El Salvador filled with young people who were being deported, who were growing up in the streets of LA that had been born in El Salvador or some other country. And we would deport them back, but we would just leave them at the airport. They would stop the plane at the airport and they would drop these young people off. And there's no social support system there to absorb them, but MS-13 would show up at the airport. And they'd say, hey, we just got deported from America. We got a place for you to live. We give you some food. You come work for us. We got a job for you, And so they literally were recruiting people off the deportation flights. And this became like, that's why they became such a powerful gang. There's a Atlantic Monthly article from years ago where they tracked the rise in the deportations and the rise in the power of MS-13, and they tracked exactly. So you can imagine if you're a young person and you just got deported back from LA for being a gang member, MS-13 is there to welcome you at the airport, and you join them and you take over your country. And that's kind of what's happened. So we now have thousands of women and children and men too fleeing Central America, coming up to the U.S. border because they can't claim asylum if they're in El Salvador, Guatemala, or Honduras. They have to come to America. I think that's what the law says. So you have to walk up to the border and ask for asylum. So that's what they're doing. And many of them are fearing for their lives. A wall isn't going to stop them from doing that. Now, people don't, when they're fleeing for their lives, they don't care that there's a wall on the southern border of America. So it's not going to make any difference. And we've had past migrant flows like that. In fact, we had them under Ronald Reagan, where Reagan didn't say build a wall. He said, you're seeking refugee in America, come on in, we'll process your case, we'll give you refugee status. Many of you might remember the Tiananmen Square incident in China. During that incident, or right after that incident, the U.S. welcomed Chinese students and gave them green cards. They were refugees because of what was going on in Tiananmen Square. And so our government recognized them as refugees and gave them green cards. The Chinese Student Protection Act was passed by Congress. We've also welcomed young Cubans. We've had big flows of Cuban migrants as refugees in the past, and instead of building a wall and keeping them out, we've let them in. The numbers coming from Central America are actually very easily absorbable by the U.S. Our economy is so big, we're such a big country, we have a record low unemployment rate right now. We need the workers. We could actually absorb these folks quite easily if we wanted to, but we don't want to. We're locking them up, detaining them, sending them back. And of course, going back even further in history, we welcomed lots more refugees after World War II without any trouble. We absorbed them quite well, had no problem whatsoever. Some of you may be even descended from some of those refugees. Some of them came up to the Kenai Peninsula after World War II and settled here and did quite well. But we've got a different attitude today. We're, of course, painting immigrants as dangerous, as diseased, dangerous people that we want to keep out of our country and a threat to our country. That, I think, has been kind of the big change is the rhetoric. So let's talk about some of the details. Okay, so you can see a little chart on the side here. Legal immigration is slowing. Okay, and I want to just talk about the top chart there. So these are pending cases. Remember, I was telling you about that young man that came in to see me and his brother filed a petition and nothing's been decided on it. So the cases are just skyrocketing, the ones that are pending. This means you're filing something for somebody, trying to get them a benefit under immigration law, and the government just won't make a decision on the case. And we're just seeing that the numbers just increasing. Now, they've been increasing before President Trump came into office, but they're significantly going up. So we're seeing longer and longer processing times. I'm an immigration lawyer. I often file petitions for the spouse of a U.S. citizen. So let's say a U.S. citizen's married, typically a young Alaskan going to the University of Alaska, falls in love with his Swedish classmate. Okay, I'm just going to pick on the Swedes because I see a fair number of Swedish people marrying Alaskans for some reason. I don't quite know why. So they fall in love and they get married and they want to file the papers to get the Swedish person legal. It used to be that the government would process the case pretty quickly, and the Swedish person, upon filing for the papers, would get a permission to work maybe in a month or two. But now the government is taking sometimes more than 6 months, 7 months, 8 months just to get that permission to work. I had a case recently with the wife of a top executive for a native corporation, and she was not given permission to work for a year and a half. No apparent reason for it. They just wouldn't process the case. 2 senators and congressmen made inquiries, nothing. Just her file sitting in some service center in the lower 48 and nothing's happening with it. And we're seeing more and more and more in that. The customer service is kind of gone. I was talking to some folks earlier about this, but there used to be a pretty cool method for figuring out what was going on with your case that was available nationwide, where you could go online and make an appointment. It's called an InfoPass appointment. They shut that down. They haven't shut it down yet in Alaska, but in the lower 48, in most places, you can't do that anymore. You're not allowed to make an inquiry by walking into an immigration office. Instead, you have to call an 800 number and wait on hold for 45 minutes. And then they hang up on you when they finally do talk to you, and they claim that the ticket was closed because they hung up on you, because they talked to you for a minute and then hung up. And then you have to call back, and then they'll say, well, there's a feature on here where we'll call you back. And so you try that feature out, and they call you back, but it's 8 hours later in the middle of the night when you don't answer the phone. They close the ticket again, you gotta call back again. So there's all this kind of crazy, weird stuff like that where there's no customer service anymore. Thankfully, I will say in the Anchorage Immigration Office, they're still letting you do InfoPass. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we're going to have that a lot longer, but in other places, lower 48, you can't do that. And on the bottom side there is pending federal immigration court cases, and those are skyrocketing. Right now, there are not enough immigration judges to handle the influx of cases. And they're putting more and more people into removal proceedings, which requires them to go see a judge. But there aren't enough judges to handle all the cases. So recently, I was in court asking for a hearing for a particular client, and I got told that the person's hearing will be in 2022. I mean, should you be forced to wait until 2022 for a court hearing about your case to decide whether you get to stay in America or not? This is crazy. And of course, the clients are very upset. People can't believe it. People are like, what do you mean I have to wait till 2022? I'm supposed the judge is going to give me a green card, but not until 2022 because he can't hear your case until then. In Alaska, our cases are all heard by one judge in Portland, Oregon. From what I can tell, he hasn't ever been to Alaska, but he's a very good judge. And he hears everything over a video. So we go to a courtroom in Anchorage at the immigration office, and the video comes on when it works, sometimes it doesn't work. And we have court hearings over the video with the judge in Portland, Oregon. He's a pretty good judge, but that's because he's been around for a while. the newer judges that they're hiring really, really quickly are not so good. The training judges, they call them. The reason they're not so good is the Trump administration has come up with a brand new way to handle immigration judges and make sure they do their duty to deport people. They now have a thing called a dashboard, which sits on their desk, and they have case completion goals. And if they're not meeting their completion goals, it goes red on their dashboard. And they sit there all day at work and they get told how they're doing minute by minute, you know, and if it's red, that means they're gonna get fired. And they're explicitly told that if they don't stay in the green, which requires them to complete cases, certain number of cases really, really fast, then they will get fired. They're on 2 years probation when they get hired. So the new judges are just like trying to get these cases through, and they're making really crummy decisions. I had a case recently where we got one of these new judges, and he basically called the client, and which you know, he called him in. He was in detention in Seattle, which is why he didn't get the good judge from Portland. So we got one of these new Seattle judges in the Immigration Detention Center in Seattle. So man from Juneau has lived in Alaska virtually his whole life. His mother's a U.S. citizen, his kids are citizens, his brothers and sisters are citizens, but he had never gotten his papers. And so he was supposed to be able to get his papers in immigration court that day. And his mother had flown into court in Seattle from Juneau for the hearing, along with other members of the family. And the judge came in to the courtroom and just immediately denied the case and ordered him deported without hearing any testimony. Crazy thing to do, but he's doing it because the dashboard says he's got to complete a certain number of cases, and so it was very easy for him to deny the case in 1 minute without hearing any testimony, and then he can go on to the next case and make his quota for the day. Okay, and we, of course, we appealed that, and the case was remanded back. No, I mean, it was a wrong decision for the judge to do that. The case got remanded back, and I called the court to figure out when the next hearing was. They said, oh, that case got remanded in Stock, so we're not going to give it to a training judge because it's going to count. You know, they're going to probably do the same thing again, and it'll get remanded, and then be in trouble. And so they're going to give it to an experienced judge. So I was relieved to hear that, but I was appalled at the fact that there's probably a bunch of other people out there who are getting the training judge, and they don't have need for their lawyer, and so maybe they don't even have a lawyer at all. They're just going to get ordered deported because they're trying to make a quota. I was in the military police for 28 years. I can imagine what would happen if I gave my soldiers a quota for writing tickets. You know, and said, you're going to lose your job in the military police if you don't write 200 tickets today. There's going to be a heck of a lot of bad tickets being written, right? And that's kind of what's going on right now with immigration courts. It's a really bad situation. And of course, there's litigation resulting from that. So slow down in legal immigration. More denials of visa petitions. The denials have skyrocketed. I mentioned the military people, they're getting denied citizenship, crazy rates. Okay. They've basically been told at the bureaucracy that they are supposed to look for any mistake that somebody made in a case and just deny it. Now, a lot of people file immigration cases without an attorney. Many smart people do that because they go online and they look at USCIS's website, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services website, and it appears to be friendly. You know, it says, you can do this and this and this, download these forms, fill these things out, send us money, you know, and we'll process your case. But they're finding out today when they do this, if they make one little mistake in the case, it gets denied. So I got a call a few weeks ago from a highly educated Alaskan who is married to somebody from Canada, not Sweden, Canada. And this highly successful Alaskan figured, I don't need a lawyer to file for my husband. I'm a highly educated person. I'm literate and everything. I can file the paperwork. So she filed all the paperwork. They took her money. And by the way, just so you know, it costs $1,760 to file all the paperwork for your spouse. If you're an American citizen trying to get your Canadian or Swedish spouse legal, $1,760 in filing fees. She filed all the paperwork. She got all the receipts. And then the case just got denied. Why was it denied? Because the government said you had to send in a birth certificate. So she sent in her husband's birth certificate. But it was a Canadian short form birth certificate, not a Canadian long form birth certificate. And it doesn't say anywhere on the government's website that you have to have the long form. It just says birth certificate. But deep buried in another website somewhere, it says that you have to have the long form. Now I'm an immigration lawyer, so I happen to know you have to have the long form. But if I had to show you the document that says that, it's like not even on the Immigration Services website. It's on the State Department's reciprocity schedule for Canada, you know. And I just happen to know that because I'm practicing immigration law. They denied the whole entire case because she sent the wrong birth certificate. And they never told her that she needed to send in this long form certificate. So what did she have to do? Refile the whole thing and pay $1,760 all over again. Okay, and this time file with direct birth certificate, get another medical exam, do all the paperwork all over again. This is an example of what's going on right now. And it's bureaucratic craziness. You know, there's no reason for that. Somebody at USCIS told me that they're not United States Citizenship and Immigration Services anymore. They serve themselves, and their job is to collect money. They're used with the agency, so they're supposed to like get as much money out of people as they can to fund the agency. But now they're being rewarded for denying cases for any little reason, and they've been explicitly told to do that. There's documents from the agency that say that. Okay, refugees. This is a hot topic. Everybody wants to hear about refugees. This is a chart that kind of shows you when, under the Obama administration, how many refugees were coming in the blue. So for Africa, 35,000. Trump has set a quota from Africa for 19,000. Near East and South Asia, Obama was 40,000, 17,500. East Asia, 12,000 under Obama, 5,000. The numbers have been cut. These are the quota numbers which are set by the president. So every year the president gets to decide how many refugees overall will come into the United States and from what regions they will come from. And the Obama administration had raised, had a pretty high quota. Keep in mind, we're a country of more than 300 million people. That's a drop in the bucket. And this is the middle of the biggest refugee crisis in world history. And the U.S. has dropped the quota for refugees to one of the lowest levels ever historically. We're just not taking people in. We're not letting them come. Now this is the quota. This isn't actually who gets to come. The numbers are lower. They set a quota, but they're not even meeting the quota. So it's fewer people than what the president targeted, okay? Because they're just basically not. It's slower. They're slower when everybody wants to come. This has a direct impact on Alaska because we have taken refugees. We don't take huge numbers of them. In the past it was a few hundred people a year, but we're lower than last year. Fewer than 100 people came to the whole state of Alaska as refugees. And the refugees who come to Alaska have been pretty much hardworking people. Once in a while we get somebody that doesn't behave themselves so well. But for the most part, our refugees have been better behaved than the average Alaskan. So we got a pretty good deal on average from them. So this has been impacting Alaska just in the sense that we just aren't getting as many people, so it reduces a little bit of our diversity. It doesn't give us access to folks from all parts of the world who we value. I think we've always valued the diversity that the refugee folks bring to us. But that's had a direct impact on us. And then the growth and detention of asylum seekers is really shocking. It used to be that if you came up to the border and you claimed asylum and you proved that you had a credible fear of persecution back in your home country, you would be released and allowed to pursue your asylum claim. You would get a hearing with an immigration asylum officer. You would, possibly get a hearing with the judge, depending on your circumstances. And you could be granted asylum. You could work while you were waiting for your case to be processed. This is no more. We're locking everybody up. You probably read the news stories in the last few days of the 6 kids who died in immigration detention. Our government is now detaining large numbers of children, small children, and not providing them with proper health care and so forth. So shockingly, 6 kids have died in immigration detention recently. Very, very shocking. We just never saw that before. The immigration detention centers are overwhelmed. They don't have enough of them. The conditions down on the border are pretty awful. Probably wondering, how does this impact Alaska? Well, before the Trump administration came in, we actually did have children from Central America coming up to Alaska. That's because we have a large Central American population in Alaska, particularly in Anchorage, but also Juneau and other places. And they were related to some of the people that were seeking asylum at the border. So typically if a kid came up to the border in Mexico or Texas or Arizona or California and claimed asylum, if they were related to somebody in Alaska, the government would release them from detention, let them go forward with their case, and they would fly up to Alaska to be with the relative who had agreed to take care of them, so the taxpayer wasn't going to take care of them. The relative would support them and take them to their court hearings and so forth. And I was handling a number of those cases. And they'd be granted asylum, and they were meritorious cases of young people who were terrified. I'll tell you a couple of stories really quickly. One case was a young man who basically had no family in Central America, and the gangs were trying to recruit him. And he fled north because he didn't want to be recruited into a gang. He was released from detention, and he had a brother in Alaska who's a U.S. citizen who had filed a petition for him a long time ago, but it was never getting processed. And so he fled north. He came up to Alaska. This guidance counselor at one of the high schools in Anchorage brought him in to see me because they couldn't figure out, nothing was happening in his case. They couldn't figure out what was going on with him, and they wanted to get him legal status. So the guidance counselor brought him in to see me. It turned out the government had just forgotten about him. So they released him from detention. They never processed his asylum application at all. They were just sort of forgot about the guy. His brother needed to take custody of him. So I was able to get his application filed, get him a hearing. He was granted asylum by an asylum officer who flew up to Anchorage from San Francisco and granted him asylum. And today he's now fully bilingual, graduate of a high school in Anchorage, entered the workforce, has a green card. He's a terrific young man, you know, and his guidance counselor did a wonderful thing by trying to give him some legal help. So great success story. He's going to be a great contributor to Alaska. If you met him, he'd smile because he's very handsome, athletic, personable guy, and he just smiles all the time because he's safe here in America. Second case, brother and sister, and their father was not present anymore in Central America. He was living in the United States. He had tried to get them here legally, but was unsuccessful in doing that. The brother was trying to protect his sister from the gangs. Those gangs down in Central America are really bad, and they were basically planning to rape the girl, and the brother was trying to protect her. And they threatened him and said if he protected her, they were going to kill him too, and then he was going to have to do bad things and work for the gang. So the brother and sister fled north. They were young teens when they fled north. Got here because the father was able to get them when they got out of detention, brought them up here, and again, once again, they were given interviews and an asylum interview. This is actually stopped now because these kids are all being detained by the Trump administration. They just won't let them out of custody now, for the most part, until they actually win their case. And they're held in places where it's hard for them to get lawyers. And it's very, very well known among immigration lawyers that if you have a lawyer, your chances of winning your case are much better because asylum law is extremely complicated and you need a skilled advocate. So a lot of these kids now, their cases are being denied because they don't have access to an attorney and they can't get the right kind of representation. It's a really bad situation, and it's making our country not such a good place, you know, that we're turning away people with legitimate claims and denying them. Of course, they're going to get an immigration judge that's got the dashboard and he's all basically denying those cases. So that's going on, and that's having some impacts up here. Okay, so more about how these changes affect Alaskans. So you're probably going to have a little bit of trouble reading the numbers here, but on the left, you can Google this impact, what immigration means to Alaska, and later on you can find this. But basically, immigrants have been a huge positive benefit for Alaska over our entire state's history. This is just, you know, should be well known by most Alaskans. They've pumped money into the economy. They've become famous dog mushers and participated in the tourism industry and built small businesses and, you know, done all kinds of great things, taught people at school, run for political office once they became citizens. You know, we are a great state with a long, successful immigration history. And we haven't had much negative impact at all from immigration. It's been pretty much all positive. You can Google this thing and it'll give you a little bit more information about all that, but it'll tell you how much entrepreneurs are invigorating the Alaska economy. It'll talk about the percentages of them. It's about 7.9% of the state's population right now are immigrants. So not a huge population, 7.9%, but significant. There are workers, our teachers, they're in the petroleum industry, in the fishing industry. We have a lot of great investments coming from immigrant investors who are buying businesses and running businesses. And you're probably aware of this because you probably know some, because that's probably why you came here tonight, right? How many people know an immigrant? Okay, pretty much everybody. Okay, so this is our history, and this business of stopping legal immigration and slowing it down and not letting refugees in the country and just becoming tougher and tougher, it's not good for our state, just like it's not good for the rest of the states either. We are a superpower because we welcome immigrants. You know, that's what made America a great country. And if you go back and read the Declaration of Independence, you'll see the line in there about Our grievance against King George, one of our big grievances, he was stopping immigration. People forget that part of the Declaration of Independence today, but that was one of our big grievances against the king. He was stopping immigration and he wasn't letting people become citizens. And we thought that was a reason to rebel. So interestingly, we've kind of come full circle. And that's not, I think, probably not good in the long run for our country. We do have demographic challenges as a country. Immigration, legal immigration can help us address those demographic problems. And we're just not facing up to that right now. It really is eventually hurting our country in the long run to be so negative about immigrants. And so these couple of years now where we've been turning our backs on our history are really troubling, should trouble most Americans. And I'm hopeful that maybe you'll take away from this discussion a little bit of factual information, go back and talk to other people, and maybe we'll see some changes in the system coming forward. Now, there is one bright little spot that I promised I'd talk about.
Right.
Temporary worker visas. The Trump administration is giving a lot more seasonal worker visas.
Where?
Because apparently the president's properties need them.
Yes.
So the H-2B worker visa, they have increased the quota for them. They're letting a lot more H-2B seasonal workers. And Alaska's always taken a lot of H-2Bs in the fishing industry. We have a lot of H-2B workers. So we're benefiting a little bit by that. But it is interesting that the president's Mar-a-Lago and so forth, his other resorts properties are taking a lot of those visas. That was apparently one of the reasons why they increased the quota, because he wanted to have more of these folks. We are taking fewer professional worker visas. They're not processing those as well. They're denying them more often, but I'm still seeing them coming through in Alaska. So that's a little bit of the right spot. The professional workers in Alaska are typically working for maybe a native corporation or a tech company or a hospital or a university. You know, those people are still being approved. And I am getting approvals of workers' visas for high-skilled workers very quickly. So I was recently able to get a number of Alaskan workers, high-skilled worker visas pretty quickly. I don't want to say the names of some of the people, but if I said them, you would go, aha, okay, and maybe someday they'll be in the news and I'll get to talk about them. But we are still getting approvals for folks like that, so that's still a positive thing that the high school workers are getting. Okay, so question.
Margaret, where does green card come in?
Mhm.
And I'm assuming it's not that green card. So it's pending, but it's pending.
That could very well be. That's fairly common. I don't know what categories applying under. You know, there's quotas for people from different countries, but that would be Canadian. So he should be getting a green card soon. And I don't know who's handling the case or what his status is, but I haven't had too much trouble, even under this administration, getting somebody who works for a university approved for a green card. It's been relatively quick. He's, then there's something wrong. Okay, because you should be able to get paid. There's a bridge worker visa that you can get while you're waiting for the green card, so I don't know what the problem is. Okay, but I don't know what the facts are. Maybe there's something odd going on in the case. One thing the Trump administration just announced today was that they're going to cancel the work visas of the spouses of professional workers. So under the Obama administration, they had a program where if you were a professional worker and you were waiting for your green card, there's long waiting periods for them. So folks from India wait like 15 years for a green card if they're a professional worker. So they were going to give their spouses permission to work, and they did that under the Obama administration. So if you're from India, and let's say you're an engineer, and you're working for, let's make up a scenario, you're working for ConocoPhillips as an engineer, and your wife is from India. Under the Obama administration, while you were waiting for your green card during that 15-year period, you and your spouse could vote. Today, the Trump administration announced they're going to strip the work permits from all the spouses. Now, this is going to hurt Alaska, I can tell you, because if you're a professional couple waiting for a green card for a really long time, it doesn't go well in the marriage if one spouse can't work and the other one is working, but the other professional spouse is not allowed to work. And I've seen repeatedly, and this is impacting Alaska right now, that when they announce they're going to have rules like that, some other country benefits from it. Anybody want to guess the country that's benefiting right now from the Trump administration? Canada, bingo. Okay, so the Canadians are now actively advertising. If America is messing you over, come to Vancouver, come to Toronto, we'll give you a green card in 2 months, and your spouse too. So the Canadians now have this thing called express entry to Canada, and they're advertising literally to young people going to schools in the United States, and they're saying, you know, those Americans are pretty messed up. They got that arbitrary, capricious, and irrational immigration system, but Canada is logical. So come to Canada, you'll have a green card in 2 months, and this is happening right now. So I got a call recently from a big Alaska employer, a governmental agency that employed an immigrant from India, and we were starting the process to try to get this immigrant a green card, and he was looking at the tea leaves, and he's going, look, it's going to take 15 years before I have a green card in America. He gave notice, he just got accepted to immigrate to Canada. So he's heading off to Canada, and the Canadians are going to benefit. Same thing with their other policies. The Canadians are taking in lots of refugees because they figured out that refugees work really hard and make good Canadians. And so if you go look at what they're advertising in our neighbor to the north or to the east here, I guess, they are very, very actively trying to recruit immigrants to Canada. And that's pretty much, you know. We do right now. Yep.
So, how is that? Because it seems like college graduates can't get jobs.
I think college graduates can get jobs. My daughter is an engineer, just graduated, or is about to graduate next week. Has had no trouble getting a very high-paying job because there's short supply. I think the people that are having trouble getting jobs are maybe more in the liberal arts, possibly. But if you're an engineer right now in America graduating from college, you're going to make more money than a lawyer.
And then what about these students?
No, we're dropping those down too. And that's actually hurting the universities because the student visa holders pay non-resident tuition. So the University of Alaska like to get a lot of foreign students because they're paying non-resident tuition and they help fund the university. And the number of student visas being issued now is down, way down.
So are they able to get loans?
No, they have to bring money from overseas. So if you've been paying attention to China, they have this exploding middle class that's quite well off, and they want to get educated in America. So they've been sending thousands and thousands of Chinese students to the United States, including to the University of Alaska. And they use money from China. They're required to do that. They can't get a loan, they can't get federal aid because they're foreign students. So they pay non-resident tuition at our colleges and universities, and they pay for it with Chinese money. And it was a big success story, but now it's, the Trump administration actually was talking about banning Chinese foreign students, period. I don't know if they'll actually do that, but if they do, it's going to cause several colleges that have significant financial problems without any of this foreign student money coming in. And the foreign students are actually generally thought to be a net asset to America because in addition to paying non-resident tuition and going, helping to offset the resident tuition that is a lot lower, they were often staying on in America after graduating, taking a good job, getting good jobs and working hard and becoming success stories. There's a lot of information out there if you're interested in sending some studies that needs to that. And we do, of course, have record levels of, very, very low levels of unemployment. It's just record right now. I think, as I said, if you're telling your kid what to major in, I highly recommend electrical engineering right now. I was just shocked. Literally, my daughter's graduating next week and had no trouble. They were in a bidding war to offer her a job at these tech companies. And the salaries they're offering these kids are just amazingly, shockingly high. Unfortunately, they're not in Alaska. The jobs are below 40 because we just don't have that kind of tech sector here. It's unfortunate. I wish we could develop one, but we don't have that. So I'm going to lose my Alaskan-born kid to Massachusetts. All right, so other questions that you have. I want to know what you can do. Okay, so get yourself educated, of course. I think that's really important to get those facts and figures out there. And you got to talk to your congressmen and your senators about this issue. And I know some of you are rolling your eyes, they won't listen to us. Well, it does make a difference if you write letters. It does make a difference if you try to set up meetings, talk about impacts. That's one of the reasons why sometimes our congressional delegation has gone more pro-immigration on issues, because they've had Alaskans coming to talk to them about a particular case where a business was hurt by the immigration policies. I have found that our congressional delegation occasionally does help out with cases, does sometimes help. So if your case is stuck, sometimes you can call a senator or a congressman and get some help. Don Young recently co-sponsored a bill to stop deporting military veterans.
Oh.
Okay, I think that's good. Okay.
It went where?
I'm sorry,
Where's the bill?
in the House of
I mean,
Representatives.
it's still,
It's
they're
still
hanging
alive,
out.
just got introduced. Yep, he came out guns blazing as a co-sponsor.
Whoa, we got something to thank you for.
Yep, we do. Okay, I think he was shocked to find out that the U.S. government's deporting military veterans, honorably discharged military veterans. They've been deporting them. They won't let them get their citizenship, and they've been deporting them. And so Congressman Young got upset about that, and he decided he was going to come in and co-sponsor a bill, and he's done that. So some kudos to Congressman Young for.
Do you know the number by chance?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I can get it for you if you email me. I'll get you a copy of the bill and the information on it. I have so many bills hitting my desk every day that I don't want to say the wrong number. Okay, so you can also write letters to the editor. You can talk, you can tell stories. I find the most effective way to get people interested in this issue is tell them the story that you heard about this particular immigrant and tell them what's happening, because people really don't believe this stuff. And when I tell them they're deporting honorably discharged military veterans, people are like, what? You know, and I go, yes. We did have a case in Alaska like that a few years ago. It was in the newspaper, so I can talk about it. It was a Marine. They were trying to deport him because when he was in the Marine Corps, he got into a fist fight. Is that shocking to anyone? Okay. He was in a military base in Virginia, stationed there, and he was off base one night. He got into a fist fight and punched another guy in the nose and broke the guy's nose. So he got charged with assault by the local police. The other guy was a Marine too. So he didn't get kicked out of the Marine Corps. In fact, they gave him an honorable discharge, years later. The Marine Corps didn't think it was a big deal that one Marine got in this fight with another Marine broke his nose. Apparently they said it was aggravated by the other guy calling him a name or something, and they were both, a little bit in a couple of years, apparently, whatever. So the Marine Corps didn't think it was a big deal. But years later, after he was discharged from the Marine Corps with an honorable discharge, he was coming back from a visit to Mexico, and he had a green card at the time, he had indefinite citizenship. And they look everybody up on the computer now. So when you're coming back in from Mexico, they ran his fingerprints and everything. They said, hey, you got a conviction in Virginia years ago for assault. We're going to deport you for that. And he was totally shocked. They were calling him an aggravated felon under the immigration laws because he had assaulted the other guy, and that's considered a crime of violence, they said. And there's a technical definition in the immigration code. Lawyers might. Well, no, this wasn't a crime of moral turpitude. Punching somebody is not a crime of moral turpitude. This was an aggravated felony because it was a crime of violence. And the thing to know, and you probably remember this, aggravated felony has a technical meaning in the immigration code. It doesn't mean it's aggravated, and it doesn't mean it's a felony. It just means it's on the list of things that are aggravated felonies. And a crime of violence is one of the things that's on the list. Okay, and perjury is on the list, and obstruction of justice, and even some crimes that you could get no jail time for at all are on the list of aggravated felonies. So they said he had done one of these things, and therefore he needed to be deported. And they said since he was a former Marine, they would give him 2 weeks to pack his bags. And they let him go back to Alaska, and they said he's got 2 weeks to pack everything up, and he's got to report to the airport so he can be deported. And luckily he decided to get a lawyer, which is me. And I was able to convince the government that what he had done was not really an aggravated felony, and oh, by the way, he's eligible to become a U.S. citizen because of honorably discharged military. So he didn't get deported because he had a lawyer. And he got sworn in as an American citizen, and there's a story in the English paper, there's a picture of me next to him in the federal jail, and he was getting citizenship. The lesson there, if you're an immigrant facing deportation, you need a lawyer, but the government doesn't give you lawyers. Because immigration law, when they're trying to deport you, it's civil. It's a civil proceeding. Even though they're kicking you out of the country, it's not criminal, it's civil. So the government is not required to give you a free attorney. So you only get a lawyer if you can pay for one, or if one volunteers to take your case. So many, many immigrants are not represented by lawyers. The government, though, has a prosecutor, they call them trial attorney, whose job is to deport person is a lawyer. So you have an immigration judge who's a lawyer, who's a judge for the government, works for the Department of Justice, but he's not an Article 3 judge. And you have a government-paid employee of the Department of Justice as your judge, and you have a trial attorney who works for the Department of Homeland Security who's getting paid to report you, and you might not have a lawyer at all. Immigration law is incredibly complicated. It's convoluted. It's federal judge once said it's the area of law that's like King Minos' labyrinth in ancient Crete. That's not a compliment to the state of the law. Okay, so it's a very difficult area of law to practice in, and most immigrants can't afford a lawyer to represent them. So a lot of people get deported because they just don't have a lawyer. I recently testified in a federal court case in California where the ACLU was suing the Department of Homeland Security because of deportations of American citizens. Those are way up. How can they do that? That's a good question. They're not supposed to deport American citizens. Okay, everybody got that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
They claim they're not American citizens. And some of these people are detained and they're in a detention center and they can't prove they're Americans. And so ICE is claiming, Immigration Customs Enforcement is claiming that they're foreigners, but they're really Americans, and they get deported that way. And sometimes it's because the database is wrong. That was what the federal court trial was about. They were talking about the fact that the database tells ICE that the person's a foreigner, but actually they were an American citizen. There's one military vet in Seattle who got a huge damage award against the government because he was a U.S. citizen. They tried to deport him. They locked him up in the Seattle-Tacoma detention center, I think, for more than 6 months. And he kept telling them he was a U.S. citizen, and they kept laughing at him and saying, you're lying, you're lying, you're not an American citizen. It turned out somebody had spelled his name wrong on the database. So they couldn't find the record that he was a U.S. citizen in the database because his name was misspelled. Okay. He ended up getting a big damage award against the government, but he sat in immigration detention for 6 months. And I can also add that immigration detention is not a fun place to be. Most of the detention centers are run by private contractors, and they're not a pleasant place to be. I've been inside them, and they don't have a lot of amenities and so forth. They don't have a big law library that you can access. Sometimes there's just like a little tiny room with a little books in it. They can't talk to any of them. I have a client who detained the guy from Juneau who I can't talk to him unless he calls me. And he has to pay a lot of money to make phone calls to talk to me. So unless he has money in his account at the detention center, he can't talk to his lawyer. I'm in Anchorage and he's in Seattle, Tacoma Detention Center. This is not a good situation. But he can't get a free lawyer. I'm the only one who would volunteer to help him for free, and I'm in Anchorage. So he's stuck with that. And so every Friday he tries to call me if he has enough money, but it's a very difficult situation for that. And of course, his mother's a U.S. citizen. He's got 2 U.S. citizens, 3 U.S. citizen kids. The state of Alaska is trying to take away his parental rights because he's in immigration detention and he can't take care of one of these kids. So civil detention. You can help in civil detention and therefore we'll be losing custody of these kids. Okay, so write, squawk, talk, tell people stories. I think those are the things to do. And then don't forget there's an election next year. So pick your candidates carefully. Okay, I will be doing that. Okay, any questions?
Are there any ones that you think would be good on this?
Good on immigration, yes. Let's see. So on the Republican side, I think there's a couple people running. I think Bill Wells is probably pretty good on immigration. He's running against Donald Trump. He's the former governor of Massachusetts. I think he's a Republican now, although for a while he was a libertarian. I can't recall any other Republicans that are running, but if anybody knows of any. On the Democrat side, there's a ton. So I don't have all the names down, but a lot of them are very good on immigration. I would say Kamala Harris, I worked with her office, she's very good on immigration. Jill Brand is good on immigration. I hate to tell the Bernie Sanders people in there, he's not bad. He's better than President Trump. And I presume if he got elected, he would hire good people and give them power and bring things to do that. There's a bunch of debatable work is great. Castro is very good on immigration. I would say on the Democrat side, pretty much everybody, I can't think of anybody who's but that's pretty typical. I think the Democrats know what the issues are, so, and they're not adopting, I would say, more of the xenophobia perspective. But there are Republicans who are the issues, who want to realize the impact on businesses and families. We'll have to wait and see.
Are they still separating children,
Yes, they're still doing that.
even though they're saying they're not?
One of the problems is that they don't always seem to know at the top what is happening in the bottom. And there's a lot of misinformation put out. So I am hearing from people on the ground that they're still doing that. I figured they were.
And they've lost thousands. They don't know where they are.
That has been a problem too. Well, like the kid I was telling you about that I got asylum for, and they just forgot about him. And they sent him up to Alaska, and nobody's tracking him.
Talking about the babies and the small children and the trauma, and I mean, what is gonna happen? I mean,
I don't know what's going to happen. All I can tell you is it's a horrible situation. I can't believe my country's doing this. Kids, it's going to be, unfortunately, I think we're living in one of these times where 50 years from now, we're going to look back on it and we're going to be really embarrassed. And we're going to have a lot of reports written, and we're going to talk about what a terrible time it was and why didn't somebody stand up and do something about it. Immigration lawyers in Alaska, a lot of them, there are people going down to the border to volunteer. And we've had a number of lawyers from Alaska that got so upset about what was going on that they went down and volunteered. And I think that's something people can do. If they're lawyers, they can do that. Also, if you're not a lawyer, so you speak Spanish, you can volunteer down there. The administration has actually started tracking the lawyers that help down the border and giving them trouble, putting them on a list. So that's supposed to create a deterrent, to get lawyers thinking that they won't want to do that kind of work. But I don't think too many people have actually been so far deterred from that. But they did make up a list of like lawyers that are helping them, giving them trouble coming in and out of the U.S., putting them in secondary, giving them hard time. And getting Mexico to ban them from going to Mexico and things like that. It's not very good.
also, didn't the Trump administration stop all kinds of help and financial assistance to these Honduras and El Salvador?
Yeah, they have proposed stopping a lot of it, and this is ironic because that actually makes the flow worse. Right? The purpose of sending a lot of aid money down there and remittances and everything is to try to stabilize the place so people don't come more. Most of the folks that I talk to from those countries would prefer to stay in their home countries if they were safe places, but they don't feel like it's safe anymore. And so I just hear trauma story after trauma story, and the story of really normal. I hear about what's going on down there. People are just getting murdered all the time. By the gangs. If you're wealthy, you can still have a pretty good life down there. So you get a lot of protection when you get a community. That kind of thing. But if you're just an ordinary person,
I'm very disturbed by I'm very disturbed by what you hear on what I call the extreme right or the right, that they're all MS-13. They're coming here to rape you. They're coming here to kill you. They're coming here to steal your job. I mean, the immigrant, especially from the southern border, below the southern border, are being totally demonized as the other, this evil. Why? Why now? Why is this happening? Is it racism? Is it?
Well, I think it's obvious from what happened in the last election that kind of rhetoric seems to work with some voters. And they believe that people are taking their jobs and that this has to be stopped. And it's portrayed as an invasion that has to be stopped. I don't think that's actually an issue, but that's what a lot of people believe. I hear that when I talk to them. They say, how can you be helping these invaders? So the only thing I can do is tell them that, my story about the people that I'm helping and they're not invaders. They're just people looking for a decent life like your ancestors, my ancestors. It's in the story of America, and we used to be proud of this. We've had our episodes in the past, the Irish got called names, no Irish can fly, and similar things were said about them when they were immigrated. How many people here have an Irish passport? Okay. Well, today they get locked up in detention centers at the border, instead of being let into America to work for, living and support themselves. But of course, they had strong claims that they're starving in Ireland and they need to come here to survive. And that was what drove that. I think most of the Irish would have stayed in Ireland if they had been treated properly. They were starving, so they came here. And we used to welcome that, and I think it made our country better. For whatever reason, we're buying into this anti-immigrant rhetoric, which doesn't help us as a country. It polarizes us and it causes us to forget about one of the greatest strengths our society has, which is that we've been welcoming to immigrants for the most part.
So if you were in charge of the world and you could do whatever legislation you wanted to do, what would be the starting point for reforming what we've got now, meaningful reform?
Okay, so one thing I would do is I would pass the DREAM Act. That's the law that would let young people who don't have a criminal record and they're not terrorists and gang members get a green card if they're here in America and they got here before they were 16. It's obvious to me, I look at the numbers and everything, those folks can contribute, and we need them in the workforce. And they're already here. So why not just give them a green card? They're not going anywhere. I talked to a young man a couple of days ago who was an engineer for one of the big oil companies up here. I don't want to name the oil company, but he was a dreamer, but he happened to marry an American citizen, so he's getting his green card. And he's got a great job. He's got no criminal record. He's a wonderful kid, and he was one of the dreamers. And there's a lot of them out there. It's not a threat to our country that we give people green cards because we don't give them to people who are terrorists and criminals. We do background checks. We just don't approve them for a green card. I fully support the idea that we should be deporting people who are dangerous. There's nothing wrong with that. But we also have to think about the consequences if we're just going to do mass deportations of everyone. It doesn't help our country. Why should we deport a tax-paying young person that can be part of our workforce or our military? The military issue is close to my heart because I'm retired as a lieutenant colonel in the service. And the Army last year didn't make its recruiting goals. They were short 6,500 troops last year. They couldn't make the recruiting goal. They originally set a goal of 80,000. They were going to recruit 80,000 soldiers last year. They dropped it to below 70,000 because they knew they weren't going to make it. And they still missed the recruiting goal by 6,500 soldiers.
So was there an act that helped solve that problem, and that's the one that's going to allow you to go out of?
They're not letting immigrants into the military, except
Like it was at one point.
yeah, they stopped the whole MAPNY program, which is a program that I developed for immigrants from the military. That's all shut down now.
So what years was it developed, and how long did it last?
So it started with a briefing I gave to this, it really started with John McCain invited me to come to Miami in 2006 and testify in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee about how they could recruit more immigrants from the military. So I flew down to Miami in July of 2006 and testified in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee that there's a law that lets you recruit immigrants from the military already on the books, but nobody's using it. And then in the fall of 2007, I gave a briefing to the Secretary of the Army about how to use this law to recruit immigrants. He told me I was a reserve officer and they're going to put me on active duty to work on that. And I get off active duty as soon as I got it through the Pentagon. So I was highly incentivized to get it through the Pentagon as fast as possible because I was living a life of hell. Okay, I was living in Anchorage, Alaska as a reservist. And they were making me fly to the Pentagon like every week. There was this flight from hell, 9:30 p.m. out of Anchorage International Airport to Minneapolis at 9:30. It's a red eye. The Army's always putting me in the cattle car in the middle seat on the red eye. And then I get into Minneapolis at 6 a.m. and I change to flight to DCA and I have to be work at the Pentagon the same day after I just spent the night. I mean, it was totally crazy. So I was flying back and forth. So I started working in January 2008 on this recruiting program for immigrants in the military, and the Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, approved it in November. Yeah, so less than a year getting through the Pentagon. I was told when I started working on it that I went to see a friend of mine who would have been a former service secretary. He worked at the Pentagon for years, and I had never worked at the Pentagon my whole career. That was the first time I had any dealings with the Pentagon. I had heard rumors that it's a pretty squirrely place to work. So I went to see my friend and I said, the Secretary of the Army just told me to put me on active duty until I get this project through the Pentagon. How long do you think it's going to take me to get this program authorized? And my friend looked at me gravely over his glasses. Because one, the Pentagon crushes refugees. And he said, I don't think you'll get this through the Pentagon, but if you get it through, it's going to take you 5 years. And I would call my husband and I go, 5 years? It's going to take 5 years for me to get this through the Pentagon. My husband's like, you're a lawyer. What do you have to do to get this through the Pentagon? I got to get the Secretary of Defense to sign a memo, right? That should take 2 weeks. And my husband's never been in the military. He thought if I drafted a memo, I could get it signed in 2 weeks, right? That's how civilian lawyers think. So I got the 2-week thing and I got the 5-year thing, and it took less than a year. I was pretty happy. And then they gave me the Genius Grant because I got it through the Pentagon in less than a year. But then, so it operated from 2008, it got authorized by Gates. They started recruiting people in 2009. If you saw the Samantha Bee article that I showed earlier, the recruiters were calling me Magic Margaret because all of a sudden they had a huge supply of legal immigrants beating down the doors at recruiting stations trying to get into the military because they could join the military and go straight to U.S. citizen in exchange for 8 years of military service. They had to stay in the military in order to keep their citizenship. And the folks on that big, long backlog, where it's going to take them 15 years to get their green card, were really smart. And they said, my God, I just graduated from MIT, it's going to take me 15 years to get a green card, or I can join the Army, and I'll be a U.S. citizen in about 6 months. And I got to do some Army time, but that's okay. It's less than 15 years. You know, so they were just beating down the doors. The Wall Street Journal ran a front page story. I still chuckle when I see the headline. Korean invasion blindsides the Army in a good way. And it was all about how hundreds of Korean students in LA were flying to New York City trying to enlist in the Army. And their parents were paying for them to fly to New York City and camp out in hotels at Fort Hamilton and try to enlist in the Army. In fact, we had so many Korean students the first day we opened the program that we would have filled our entire quota of the whole program. South Korean men that wanted to join the U.S. Army. One of them told me, Colonel Stock, I get you 50,000 Koreans, you know, because they want to join the U.S. Army, not the Korean Army. But they made some great troops. We got the 2012 U.S. Army Soldier of the Year was one of these guys. We got doctors. We got, you know, really incredibly highly educated people. They did a study of the program. They said it was wildly successful, and it didn't cost them anything. They didn't have to pay them extra. They just paid them like regular soldiers, you know. It wasn't any extra expensive. So the program operated successfully from 2008, got authorized in 2008 till 2016 when they shut it down, and that's what the Samantha Bee episode is all about. There was a woman that came into power, and at that time she doesn't like foreigners in the military, so she's trying to get rid of the foreigners in the military. And she created all these internal policy memos to basically remove them. So there are now multiple lawsuits, big lawsuits going on all over the country. I got to testify with one last December in Seattle where we won. I was an expert witness in the case, and the judge ruled that the government had violated the Constitution in the discriminatory way they were treating the immigrants who were coming to the military. And then yesterday there was another big victory in Washington, D.C. in one of the lawsuits. So the federal courts are still functioning, and they're still following the Constitution, and they're still making rulings that follow the law. That's a hopeful sign, I think, that we're still seeing that moment. And they're reversing a lot of the bad, really super bad stuff. And that fight will continue. So the big excitement these days is the lawyers. Lawyers are working, immigration lawyers are working like crazy right now. In fact, if anybody wants to come work my law firm, you're immigration lawyers. Okay, you have a question.
How long do you think that's gonna last? They were not appointing, they were not okay, Obama's ones that he's appointed, and now they're just rushing.
Right, and that they're putting lots of judges in that, yeah, no, they're getting improved.
And they're lifelong.
They're appointed for life. Okay.
I have a question. Why do they have to go to New York to sign up for the military? There's no way they could do it in LA or?
Okay, that's a good question. When we opened the program, it was a huge change for recruiters. And they needed me to train the recruiters. So I had to like personally train all the recruiters, and I couldn't train everybody in the country at once. So when they originally opened the program, they said, let's just do New York. They weren't sure it was going to work. Okay, I kept telling people, hey, it's going to work fine. Don't worry about it. No, if you don't know anything, you're not a recruiter. So they said New York City has a lot of different immigrants. So that's a great place. And the recruiters there couldn't find, they had really, really deep trouble finding people who were qualified for the military in New York. Side note, 75% of American youth of military age can't meet military duty standards.
75%.
75%, yeah. Okay, and it's obesity, drug use, marijuana is a problem. Military doesn't want you to do your usual part-time. Can't pass the test to get into the military. Mental health issues. Yeah, they do. Oh yeah, you can look at it as a factor. Okay, and so the military's recruiting standards are actually pretty high. Or have been. So they can't. There's reports out there you can read on this if you're interested in something. But basically, 75% of the young people in our country today cannot meet military enlistment standards. The ones in military age. And then there's the other issue of, are they interested in the military? So the ones that do meet military standards are often not interested in the military. They're in college. They're working for Google, Facebook, oil company, whatever they're doing. But the propensity to serve is low among the youth military age population. So the military has a hell of a time right now finding qualified recruits. And that's one of the reasons why the Charlottesville killer got recruited by the Army. He was schizophrenic. He went in to see an Army recruiter. They told him, if you're on meds for schizophrenia, you can't come into the Army. So he went back home and got off his meds and then came back and enlisted in the Army. And he washed out of training after about 5 months. And then, of course, he went down to Charlottesville and murdered the woman in Charlottesville. But the Army didn't take notes on him when he came in and didn't put in the computer that this guy's schizophrenic, don't let him in. So he ended up getting into the Army. That's not a good thing for folks like that. The Army has recently relaxed some of their recruiting standards and take more Native Americans, and things like that, which is not a good thing, because we know they're going to screw up. Statistically, there's going to be problems with those folks. So anyway, back to your question about New York. Okay, so originally New York City Recruiting Battalion was never able to meet its quota. And they figured, what the heck, let's send her to New York, she could train all those recruiters. And New York City Recruiting Battalion went from having the worst recruiting record, they couldn't fill their quotas, to having the best one in the country like overnight. So that's why they're calling me Magic Margaret. The recruiters call me that. It's like, she made my job super easy because all these highly qualified, highly educated people with no criminal record and no history of drug use are lining up in front of my recruiting station and walking in with all their paperwork in order. And I don't have to chase them down at the mall or anything. They're like, get me into the Army as fast as possible, Sergeant. I want to go now, And they're scoring like 99 on the Armed Forces qualification test. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. There was a picture in the New York Times of the first bunch of people who scored in the university. They shut down Times Square for the ceremony. General Casey, the chief of staff of the Army, flew in and all the black limousines and everything, big ceremony. People in the picture, there's a picture from the New York Times of all these people raising their right hand and wearing Army t-shirts. Master's degrees, PhDs. There was a guy from Norway who looked like he was Chinese. He's actually the son of Chinese immigrants to Norway. He spoke 5 languages fluently, and he had a master's degree, and he was enlisting in the Army because, hey, it's America. He said, I'm welcomed here. I feel like I can be really successful in America's Army. It's a very diverse place, and I'm going to get my American citizenship. And he was just so happy to be joining the Army. The recruiters were just knocking themselves out. They were just totally, wow, this is so cool. All these people really want to join the Army, to chase them out. So it was very, very successful. But that's why we were in New York. Eventually, we spread to the rest of the country, but they had to do a video that they could show to the other recruiters. Try to recruit. You have to have some knowledge of immigration law to recruit immigrants. So we had to teach the recruiters all the ins and outs of immigration law. And then we had special procedures. We had to clear everybody with the Department of Homeland Security. So DHS had to individually vet every single recruit before they came in. We didn't want people who had big papers or anything like that. So we had a special procedure set up for the recruiters to collect all their immigration documents and send it to the DHS. And DHS would look at it and stamp approved or disapproved. And I was working with DHS on that.
Totally shut this madly program.
Totally shut down. Yeah, they shut it down on September 2016. They said they thought that foreigners were infiltrating the military.
So this was still under their law.
Yeah, it actually started under Obama. It was because the woman that was in the, she came in, she's still there. She's still there. So she's basically thinks anybody with foreign ties is dangerous. She's also actually now kicking out, she's turned to kicking out dual citizens. So if you're a U.S. citizen, you hold dual citizenship. She started a program to try to get you to, and then people with foreign relatives, anybody with foreign ties, they're starting to ask people if you've ever sponsored an immigrant.
She met the president.
I don't know.
I mean, my God, he's got,
I don't know.
Sorry.
Foreign ties. Anyway.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up because yes. Okay, if there's a message you can get out to any of the immigrants that you know is stay away from marijuana until you're a citizen. Then you can exercise whatever rights you have under the Alaska state law. But right now, if you buy it, sell it, possess it, grow it, invest in a grow shop, and you're an immigrant, your career in America is in grave jeopardy. You might not get your citizenship, it could be deported. Just admitting to the possession of marijuana can cause you to be deported. So you gotta stay away from it. If you have any questions about that, see a lawyer. I'm happy to give you a handout, or you can just Google immigrants and marijuana, and there'll be a big warning from the Immigrant Legal Resource Center popping up. They have a brochure they're handing out to everybody, trying to get the word out, because for whatever reason, people are not getting the word out. I keep running into immigrants in Alaska. I'm glad you brought that up, who have mistakenly invested in a grow operation, and now they're going to be ineligible to become American citizens.
Even though it's legal.
Yeah, it's only legal under state law, not federal law. And the ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, is going after people for marijuana, especially in states where it's legal. Because it's easy pickings. You know, people don't know that they can't have anything to do with marijuana. They think it's legal. Well, it's legal under state law. It's not legal under federal immigration law.
This is a little bit of information, but I'm curious as to the level of the armed forces that this organization is. Is it 8th grade, 12th grade?
Okay, so it's called the Armed Forces Qualification Test, or also, it's a little bit complicated because they have this thing called the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, ASVAB. And it's basically, anybody here taking it? All right, so you know what I'm talking about. It's got those weird spatial recognition things and spelling and math and all that. It's supposed to be on a bell curve. So the scores like up to 99. The Army's not supposed to take anybody who scores less than 35. And the average person in America is supposed to get like a 50. The Army, when we opened the Mountain Recruiting Program, the average Army soldier at the time, the one in the Army, the ones in the Army got a 60. But the Army wasn't allowed to take anybody who got less than 35. So they could, you know, that you can see the spread. You know, between 35 and 99. Very few people in the category 1, which is the high scores, were coming into the Army. They just weren't. So most of the people coming in were between 35 and maybe 70%. The Mavneys came in and they were scoring an average of 89. Okay, so the immigrants were getting an average of 89. So that's another reason why the Army loved, recruiters loved these recruits, because their quality marks were going way up on the recruiting immigrants. The recruiters get rated on the quality of the recruit they're bringing in, and they're getting much higher quality marks. So the Army just loved the program because the quality marks jumped up, and they didn't have to take people who had not very high scores. If you scored low on the test, there's a correlation between how well you do in the Army. And that's statistical, and they've got all these studies about it, and that's why they had the test. They can tell if you're going to be successful in the Army. If you score higher, you know, although very smart people actually don't do that. People want kind of, you know, not too smart, you know. I guess because they're unhappy with the bureaucracy. They tend not to stay in that long. But the lower scoring people have more trouble, you know, following instructions and The Army's pretty high tech these days too, so you need people can read and math and that kind of. But the Army's now begun to take a lot more people that are what they call category 4, so they're done school very high. But the recruiter just put on Facebook the other day, category 4 people, we're welcome now in California, National Guard. You know, I was looking at that, that's great. But
For our security, we do not think.
well, okay, I mean, I don't want to, everybody's an individual, right? There's some
Right,
people
I
who
get
do fine, but statistically, it's harder to lead an army with, you know, it's like employers, right? We want to hire the smartest people we can. Okay, and if somebody can't pass the test, it tells whether they're going to do well in the army and don't have to do well in the army. And find out the case.
So many of these foreign folks were educated when they entered the army. The army didn't have to pay for it. I know people who entered the military and been educated.
Right,
So they came in fully educated, most of them.
They did.
And so that also is safe.
Yeah, the Army saved a huge amount of money on language training because they all spoke foreign languages. And they didn't have to send them to the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, which costs a ton of money. So they didn't have to do that because they're native speakers of whatever language. When the earthquake happened in Nepal, one of them, who was Nepalese, was in a picture of the State Department standing next to the aid worker from the State Department translating for them. You know, and the Army didn't have to spend money on her. You know, just pulled her out of the ranks and said, go to Nepal, you speak Nepali, you know, stand next to the State Department guy and translate for them. They didn't have to pay a contract interpreter. And their picture was all over the news, you know, Army soldier, translating with it. There were hundreds of stories like that. There was an Army general who was congratulating me because he had sent a special forces team into Africa, into a village in Africa, and they decided they would check the computer system to see if there's any Maoris that speak the language in that village. And sure enough, there was one. And guess what? He was actually from the village. So they put him on the special forces team and they sent him into the village, and he's wearing an American uniform, a sergeant in the U.S. Army. And everybody in the village knew who he was, and they were like totally impressed. Like, one of our own went off to America, and he's now in the U.S. Army, and he's like a big success story. He also knew who had stolen whose fish 20 years ago. Okay, so they had more intel on everybody in that village. They said the special forces mission was incredibly successful because they had this guy with them who knew everything about the village. He knew all the people and what their fights were, and all this kind of stuff. And so the general was telling me, like, I don't know what caused you to think about this recruiting program, but this is like amazing. The Special Forces Operations Commander was a real component of the program. He thought it was fantastic. And they've now lost access to all these people. So. Well, I was an immigration lawyer, and I was also in the military police for 28 years, so I was versed in military law. And I have, I guess, a family history of, you know, I knew my family's history. My great-grandfather was in the U.S. Army in the late 1800s, and he was not an immigrant himself, but he served in a conflict that some of you might have heard of called the Boxer Rebellion. And then he served in the Philippine insurrection, and he made it to the rank of colonel by the time World War I rolled around. And in our family history, at one point, we had a copy of the census report from 1890. You know, they do the census every 10 years. So they were doing a census of military units overseas, and we had a copy of his page of the census report. And I remember him because he lived in our house when he was really old. He was in his 90s. He was living in our house when I was a kid. I used to play with his military regalia and everything. So at some point in my life, I looked at his papers, and there's this copy of the census report. And it showed the names of everybody in his military unit on one page, you know, and it had like their name, it had his name and where they were born, and it had where he was born, and then it had, you know, all kinds of other information about him. They were keeping track of it for the census. And 13% of his army unit was made up of immigrants. And I just knew that, and I remember looking at that and going, wow, that's interesting. There's one from Italy, and Germany, and Mexico, and they were all over in Asia fighting for the U.S. Army in the late 1800s. And then as an immigration lawyer, I was really interested in that, and I read a lot of books. 20% of the U.S. Army during World War I was immigrants. 20%. You know, they went over to fight in Europe, and they would make them citizens at basic training because they didn't want to have legal problems. If you were a German citizen fighting against the Kaiser, you were in big trouble. So if you turn them into an American, there's no problem. And then I had read other books. The recent one, if you're interested, Sons and Soldiers. It's about the young Jewish immigrants in the 1930s who came to America. They were actually brought by the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, kind of get them out of Germany because you know they're going to be in trouble. And they got them into the United States. When the U.S. went to war with Germany, what did we do? We drafted them. We turned them into citizens. We made them part of a military intelligence unit that was responsible for interrogating German prisoners on the Western Front. And they were responsible for 60% of the actionable intelligence on the Western Front during World War II. Might have been part of this unit, I don't know, but you might want to check out the book Sons and Soldiers. Sons and Soldiers. But today, you know, we would have locked up those teenagers in the detention center. We wouldn't have let them in the country. We wouldn't let them in the army. We wouldn't give them citizenship. But they turned out to be incredibly valuable. There's another book, I can't remember the exact name, The Dawn, it's got midnight in the title, but it's about Japanese Americans, little known story. You probably all heard about the battalion that went over and fought in Italy, you know, the Hawaii's former senator was part of that group. There's actually a group of Japanese Americans who were interrogators in the Pacific. And they kind of kept the whole thing secret because they didn't want the Japanese to know about it, and it's only come out recently. But they were responsible for interrogating the few Japanese who were captured, because the Japanese often didn't want to be captured. But they were picking up all the documents off the battlefield and translating them to the U.S. forces and getting a lot of really valuable intelligence. They were actually responsible for Yamamoto his plane being shot down. And few Americans know about this, but they made a huge difference to the war effort in the Pacific. And they were either immigrants or the children of immigrants born in America that were recruited for the U.S. military. Many of them came out of the camps. And we rounded all the Japanese up and put them in camps. They would go to the camps and say, if you want to get out of the camp, you can join the army. And we'll put you in a special unit. And you got recruited for a special unit. Some amazing stories. I recommend that book if you're interested. I can't remember the exact title. It's got midnight in the title, and it's about Japanese Americans. So I kind of knew a lot of this history, and that's why I don't think it was actually a genius idea. It was just like, why are we not doing now what we used to do? Because we won our wars. Another one, Continental Army. George Washington, at one point, half of his army was immigrants. At one point during the Revolution, the lowest point in the Revolution. There's a funny story about Baron von Steuben. You probably heard of him, right? How many people heard of Baron von Steuben? Okay, so he was the Prussian officer at Valley Forge who taught the Continental Army how to march and all that sort of thing. He apparently showed up at Valley Forge and demanded a translator. So he could speak in German and the translator was supposed to speak in English. And somebody tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, Baron von Steuben, you don't actually need a translator. The troops understand German. So there were so many German troops, immigrants, serving in the Continental Army in Valley Forge. So it was a very significant chunk of people. But that was also true. Union Army during the Civil War recruited tons of Irish. There's a song by Steve Earle. Who's a Steve Earle fan? Dixieland. Okay, we spilled our blood in the battle's heat. Now we're all Americans. It talks about the Irish coming over, the Fenians escaping the British. They get on a boat. The captain's brother was a railroad man. He met us at the boat, and I joined up with the 20th meeting. I tell you, friend, I'm a fighting man. And it's all about that. It's a song about the Irish joining the Union Army and becoming American citizens. The Confederate Army also recruited the Irish, but they didn't recruit as many as the Union Army. So that's why the Union Army won. So it's just been a long, I just knew the history of it because I was an immigration lawyer and I was in the military. So I was like the person in that place at the time to say, hey, let's go back and do it the way we did it in the old days. So now it's done.
So you're going to run for office again, Margaret?
Don't know, haven't decided. Right now I'm really busy.
Crazy. So do you know how many?
I cannot give you the exact number.
And are they all
Oh no, there's detention centers all over the country
for them?
for immigrants, yeah. I mean, we have one that's right near the Seattle airport.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how long are you?
It depends. Depends on your case. Depends if you give up and agree to go home quickly, you get denied quickly. If you get a lawyer and win your case, you know, you might get granted right away and then you get out of detention.
What's the
There is no rule. You can be in detention for years. Yeah. They can, some of the immigration judges deny bond. They just won't let people bond out, and it's civil detention, so you can be denied bond. And you just get stuck. Yes.
So I'm curious about your opinion. So I know that they're along the Mexico-US border, which is really dangerous areas because of Mexicans were using drugs. And I'm curious about your thoughts on what you can about
Okay, so first of all, most of the drugs come in through ports of entry.
okay,
So they come in.
a lot of really dangerous areas, and I have friends that, you know, there are really dangerous areas along the Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
US border.
Right, but the factual, I mean, this is the fact, the vast majority of the drugs coming in don't come in like somebody walking across the border. They come in at the port of entry. Okay, and I'll give you an example because I've seen it. I used to be on the commission, the Immigration Commission for the American Bar Association, and I go down and do border tours. And typically, you go down the border, you're standing, there's a port of entry, you know, there's a bunch of cars lined up and gates and immigration agents and everything. And very common scenario, I watch it all the time when I'm standing there, they got dogs running up and down the cars, dog alerts on a car. They pull the car in the secondary. Okay, you can describe one exactly. The big SUV, late model SUV with the woman driving it. She had a baby in the car with her. They pulled, she's an American citizen. They pulled the car in the secondary. They had this little device that they check the density of the tires. And they just walked up to the vehicle and they checked the density of the tires, and the needle went off the scale. The tires were packed with drugs. So they pulled the tires off the vehicle, they cut it open, and sure enough, all these bags started falling out of the tires. And this kind of thing happens every day of the week, probably every hour. There was a person on a bridge in Mexico watching to see who gets through and who doesn't get through, you know, because they figured they'll get a certain number of people through. She's an American citizen, so she's not going to get deported.
So are the people who are going to, where are they coming in? Are they trying to go across, or are they simply trying to pass their sanitary?
Well, right now, a lot of them are actually trying to do the passport side. Now, some people do try to come in illegally. You know, that's always been an issue on the southern border. Except it didn't used to be illegal for people to come in, you know, like one time. I would say with the refugee crisis from Central America, most of those people walk up to the border and try to find a border agent to say, I want to claim asylum. Okay, but there are other people that are just trying to sneak in. And it's a big challenge for the border patrol.
Well, that's what I understand is that the border patrol is.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of, like, 90 people are running about the border with drugs. I don't know about now, but before, they just basically have to travel the border and annex.
Okay, if somebody comes across the border with drugs, they don't just kick them back. They prosecute them federally.
The border patrol agents
Mhm.
their cases will be kicked back. Not there, it's being filed. So it's prosecuting. So guys, if he picks up.
Okay, he's not talking about people with drugs, though. They prosecute people. Well, I don't think that's true. I mean, not from where I've seen it. You know, I mean, I saw them prosecuting, you know, and they have a big effort to prosecute people for any kind of illegal drug. And I, you know, I see the cases, I see the convictions. And,
It sounds like it's really, you know, constant.
well, it is at the ports of entry.
No, it's not.
Not, that's not one word, and there's a lot of large. We need the ground. Life. Because of the amount.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would disagree that it's rampant everywhere along the border. It's not. Some of the most high.
But, you know, a lot of areas around.
Well, a car is stolen every 7 minutes in Anchorage, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, there's violence, there's crime no matter where, but if we say that it's all happening because of one particular group of people, that's bias, that's a judgment, and we're discluding the reality of crime across the United States, so.
Yeah, I think the border situation.
I'm not saying that, I'm saying, okay, so we do have a problem. So, and I'm not saying that we're doing this anyway, but what I'm saying is, do you have any of this, of what, my understanding of what is a problem there. So, from the point of view of people who like live close to the border, who are seeing, that part of actually happening. What are some solutions other than building a wall, or talking down all of our immigration laws? What are some things we can do to make that border work differently so that on these border just like, you know?
Okay, so one thing we can do is make it possible for people to immigrate legally in an organized fashion that, you know, where they pay fees and they get visas and they come in and, you know, dry up the incentive that drives people to, if you are separated from your family and you can't get into the country for years, you know, you're going, things like the story that I'm telling you. There should be a way for people to immigrate legally in a reasonable period of time, especially if they have a job here or their families, you know, that stops a lot of this stuff. Okay, the drug thing, I mean, where's the blame there? Okay, who's buying these drugs?
Yeah, the price of the United States
You know,
argues there's a high demand for it, so people are willing to pay whatever it is.
Right.
yeah,
There's like two prices.
The Americans should pay for the drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
but the reality is,
They can have money, they can keep through their families and pay for the drugs.
Exactly.
okay, I don't think building a wall across the entire border is any solution. First, it's not gonna work, and it's gonna cost too much, and you gotta man the wall, and, you know, it's easy to get around walls and over walls and all kinds of, you know, that kind of thing. Limited walls in certain areas, no problem, they can work. Okay, there's some areas where it makes sense to have a wall. There's other areas where it makes more sense to use tech. You know, drones and cameras and sensors and things like that. Stopping people from coming through the deserts, you know, and things like that. Have policies that try to make people come in legally rather than paying some smuggler a ridiculous amount of money to come through the desert. It is true that most of the drugs are not coming in across the border. I mean, there are drugs coming in, but that's not the preferred method because it's hard actually to get them in that way. It's a lot easier to put them in a truck or a train or have some American citizen drive across the border. And people get in all the time with huge loads of drugs. Or a boat, you know, or a plane. You know, the people that are pushing the drugs into the country want to get the drugs in. They want the maximum amount in, and they want it in efficiently and fast, and they're willing to pay a price. It's prosecutions here and there with that. But it's very sophisticated operations that, you know, Border Patrol is pretty well aware of all the different ways people are coming in, and they know the ports of entry are where they need to focus on drugs. That's where most of it's coming in. Although it is sometimes coming in by land, you know, people walking across. You just can't bring that much in.
So most of it is coming in where there's the most scrutiny.
Yeah.
Right now, compared to the open areas of the border.
China, yeah, right, the fentanyl.
Well, there's a whole bunch of, and then, you know, we're not talking about Canada either. But,
Exactly.
You know, like that border, I hate to tell you, there's a lot of stuff coming over that way too. But the only way we're ultimately going to stop all the drugs coming is if we stop using the drugs, you know, and then people won't use them. That's a big problem. And then, of course, we can't get into the drug problem without talking about prescription drugs and all that kind of stuff. None of which is coming in illegally at all. You know. But, yeah. Right. There is a good movie that is out now. I'll try to send you the link so you can send it around to everybody. But it's about some people that went all along the border. They actually followed the entire border, bicycling, hiking, Talking to people along the border. I recommend it to you. I can probably look it up if I check my phone because I've been talking about it. It was on Netflix the other night, and I just happened to watch it, and it's absolutely fascinating. But you'll see all the different parts of the border and what it looks like and what's going on in all the different parts of the border. And I think it does paint a pretty good picture of what's actually happening in different sections and what the border's like. And yeah, some people are coming across, you know, there's no wall everywhere, so there are places where people swim across and walk across. Most of the walking across has been pushed out into really dangerous areas that are remote, you know.
So speaking of that, so the grannies who respond, the people who go down, put water along the roads in places that are not.
Prosecute them.
So if it's the equivalent, if I went out and knew there were people walking by and I put water out on the sidewalk out here, I could be prosecuted for doing that.
Feds are prosecuted.
What's the crime?
Aiding and abetting. They busted a woman who was a lawyer for what state the other day because some migrants were sitting by the side of the road and she
Gave them a ride. Somebody was near death.
Yeah. And I think she gave a ride to the border patrol.
Yeah, I think somebody was ill. One of the persons was really.
I think they'll probably drop the prosecution.
I bet.
They're prosecuting them for having given these guys a question. Right.
I mean, there was 6
kids.
She got, and they're just talking about it now. So we and us are saying they cover up eyes and detention. Do you think anything will come of that?
I don't know. There's also another news story that you might have missed because I don't think it got a whole lot of press coverage, but I happen to know the person who was featured in it, so I was paying attention to it. Ellen Gallagher is a whistleblower at DHS. Went public about how for years she's been trying to get them to stop this solitary confinement practice that they have, putting immigrants in solitary confinement. And she had repeatedly tried to work within the Obama administration was doing this to try to get them to stop this practice of putting immigrants in solitary confinement all the time. And they do this basically because if you're too much trouble, whether you have a mental health problem or something, you just throw you in solitary because it's easier to deal with. And she tried to work within the administration to get them to stop it, and finally she gave up and became a whistleblower. And she's now gone public with it. I would check out that story if you're interested in these issues because it's pretty compelling. And it took a lot of guts for her to blow the whistle, but she was just so horrified at abuses that were going on that she felt like she had to say something. And she's a career DHS employee, and, had put her career on the line basically with whistleblower. Just the story is a lot of people are lying repeatedly in public about what was going on with officials, which is a little disturbing.
Is there a good source for where the money, like we don't do private prisons in Alaska, and that's intentional. Is there a money trail for who's making money from this?
There is. The private prison companies benefit. In fact, there was a document leaked, I would say, I guess, in some litigation where a private prison executive was talking about how putting Americans in jail was no longer a growth market for them. And so they were going to focus on tough immigration laws because that was where all the growth was going to be in their market. Right, they make campaign donations. Well, it was happening under Obama too, but what they would do is the private prison companies will donate money to candidates who support locking up more immigrants because they're going to have to do a contract with the private prison company, and so the company's going to make a money. And so that's what they were talking about. The growth industry is the private prison for immigrants. Because they basically run the numbers and they said there's not enough Americans that we can lock up because the 3 strikes and you're out is starting to be disfavored, and the states don't want to put lots of people in jail anymore and reducing prison sentences and legalizing marijuana and all that sort of thing. So they said that, they were just doing the bottom line. Or if you're running a company, you got to make money, right? So they analyzed the numbers and they said that the growth sector was no longer locking up Americans, so we need to crack down on immigrants. And that came out in a case. And then the other piece of it that absolutely amazes me is they locked up immigrants because they're not supposed to be working here.
And then
And
they
then
work
they put them in the private prison and they get to put them to work for $1 a day. So it's legal for the immigrants to work for the private prison company, but not legal for them to work for McDonald's, Taco Bell, or, outside. Well, there's a lawsuit over that now too, in Colorado. The federal judge board said basically that's what it was. But the company's profits depend on that. They need to have a captive workforce in order to make a lot of money. Yeah, and especially one that doesn't have to be paid benefits and, all that extra money that they have to pay like an American worker who's working for them doing the same job. So it's very ironic to me when you dig up all these rocks and start looking at.
Are there standards I've heard, I don't have a reliable source, that, like we do church background checks, and if you're going to work with children, you have certain levels of accountability and background checks that isn't, that's not legislated. It's not necessarily something they have to do when they're, especially with the children.
Okay, so they're supposed to do background checks on people, but there's been a problem. Border Patrol has a very hard time hiring people. You probably know that if you know some Border Patrol folks. And they've, over the years, sometimes relaxed standards because they just can't get people unless they do. So that's been a problem. If you talk to the people who are doing the hiring, it's the same problem the military's having. You just can't find qualified people who can pass all your background checks. They were polygraphing everybody who was trying to join Customs and Border Protection, but then they couldn't find enough people who could pass the polygraph. I know, I agree, it's not that accurate, but they, for whatever reason, they decided they needed to polygraph people, and they were losing everybody, like crazy numbers of people were flunking the polygraph, and so they decided, they asked Congress if they could not polygraph anymore. There have been some notable crazy hiring stories, maybe interesting that, but it's a problem. It's not just the Border Patrol's problem, it's a problem.
Do you think it Trump's plan more of the because I see a lot about this kind of policy raising, only letting people without advanced degree, leave all people behind where they need are able to.
Yeah, I think it's appealing to people, but we actually do already have a system for skilled workers. So it's not something new for him to propose. He just wants to do it differently. So the same people will be coming, but they'll be coming in different ways.
But it would be a big
Well, I don't know until they actually come up with a bill and they write it out in Congress. It's really hard to predict what's going to happen. But it looks like basically what he's proposing will reduce overall levels of immigration and not actually keep it the same. And then we already allow skills, highly skilled people in the country. And I think those cases every day. So I don't think it's really what's going to do is reduce the number of family immigrants. But probably what will happen is the same people will be coming in, they'll just be coming in under a different category. The highly educated people usually get a good immigration somehow, unless they're from India or China or some kind of place. The average Swede, we were picking on Sweden earlier, who's highly educated is not going to have a problem. The proposal that he's come up with, they're trying to mimic what the Canadians do, but not in a very efficient way. So I don't see it making a big difference in terms of positive outcomes. I think it'll just some people just coming in different ways.
Yeah.
Well, it's not really his idea. It's been debated.
Yeah.
It's been that way for one. You can go look at Immigration Wars, Jeb Bush's book from years ago. Jeb Bush wrote a book called Immigration Wars. He proposed that. He wanted to go to a point system for skilled immigration instead of the system we have now, which is not points-based. So I know you probably don't want to get bored with gory details, but we don't have a points-based system. So the Canadians have essentially a points-based system. You get certain points for things, like you speak English or French, you get points. How old are you? You get points. And you add up all the points you qualify in the Canada. That's not what we do. We have a statute that lists certain things you have to prove, and you don't get points for them. You just get either approved or disapproved by the adjudicator if you meet these requirements. So I'll give you an example. You wrote a famous article. You got a gold medal in the Olympics. You won the Iditarod. Okay, you don't get points, but you get a green card and you did those things. Okay, so that's skills-based immigration. It's just our version of it, which is not, you don't give points, you give a bureaucrat the right to look at your packet and go, hey, you look pretty cool. You won the Iditarod in Alaska, I'm giving you a green card. Okay, so your skill is dog mushing, or you wrote a lot of scientific papers that are cited all over the world, we're going to give you a green card. Or you made a record that sold really well, we're going to give you a green card. So it is skill-based, it's just not points, the point system. You know, Canadians and other countries have like points, and you just, you know, get enough points, you win. So you don't really need a lawyer either. In America, you need a lawyer because the lawyer's got to go to the statute, and one part of the statute says you have to have 3 out of the following 10 criteria, and another one says you got to have 4 out of 6. The lawyer's got to figure out which statute to plug you in, and it requires a lot of intellectual work and arguments and, you know, convincing the adjudicator. So we put these packets together that are kind of like, you know, look at me, how great I am, you know, with pictures and all that kind of stuff. And then if the person likes it, they approve you for a green card, and if they don't like it, you get disapproved. So it does give a lot of power to creative immigration lawyers. Okay, I think we're well past our time, right? God, am I talking too much? Okay, thank you so much for coming tonight.
See you later.